Before we start the show, a brief note that today's episode deals with suicide. If you or someone you know are having thoughts of suicide, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-TALK.
Love now and
Did you fall in love last night? I love
Love is stronger than anything.
Feel the love.
And I love you more than anything.
There's still love.
From the New York Times, I'm Anna Martin. This is Modern Love. When the author of today's essay, Samantha Joseph, was growing up, she had one role model, one person she aspired to be, one person she thought was the absolute coolest. And that person was her Aunt Gail. But when Samantha was a teenager, something devastating happened. Her Aunt Gail died by suicide. And Samantha would spend most of her life trying to understand why. Her search for answers took years and led her into all kinds of unexpected situations, including a nerve-wracking conversation with the actor David Schwimmer. Samantha Joseph, welcome to Modern Love.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Samantha, you're here to talk about an obsession you had with David Schwimmer, who of course played Ross on Friends. And in the beginning of your Modern Love essay, you explain why you're so obsessed with him. Why don't you read that part for us?
Sure. For years, I had been having a conversation in my head with David Schwimmer. It's because of my Aunt Gail. She was a comedy division manager at NBC in the 1990s, and she worked on shows like Friends and Will and Grace and Blossom. She died by suicide at 39 in November of 1999. And after her death, an episode of Friends was dedicated to her.
What's up?
The episode is called The One with Ross's Teeth.
What happened to your teeth?
I whiten them.
Ross over-whitens his teeth and ends up on a date with a woman who has a blacklight.
So, where were we?
When the lights go out and the blacklight comes on, his teeth practically illuminate the room.
What's the matter with you?
What's the matter with me? You've got a black light. It's 1999.
I always thought it would have made Aunt Gail laugh. And because she died before the internet was part of our daily lives, this dedication is one of the first things that comes up when you search for her name. She worked with many celebrities, but her friends told me she had a special affinity for David Schwimmer. She even named one of her cats Rupert because apparently he would give that as his name when he checked into hotels. About 5 years ago, I found out that David Schwimmer was going to be speaking at a conference I could plausibly convince my boss to send me to. I wondered if this might finally be my chance to have that conversation in real life. Without giving it enough thought, I registered for the conference and booked my flight from Boston to New York. Several weeks later, when I was actually in New York, the panic set in. In my head, David Schwimmer always said exactly the right thing. What if a real-life conversation with him didn't measure up? Was it worth the risk? There was a lot at stake.
There was so much at stake because your Aunt Gail, it seems like, was so important to you. And I want to understand why. I want to know more about Aunt Gail. How much did you see her growing up?
She lived in California and we lived in Pennsylvania, but we were a very close family. So we saw her, several times a year. We visited California. She came to see us, and she looms very large in my memory.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about one of those visits to California.
Yeah.
You're smiling so much.
It was just such a magical place and time. I was 6 and 7 when we visited. My two sisters and I kind of bundled into one bed in her apartment, into the backseat of a car.
Was she in Hollywood? Was she right in the middle of it?
She was in Hollywood.
Wow.
We went to Disneyland, and Knoxbury Farm in particular really stands out. It's like the Snoopy of Disneyland.
Okay.
But, she just had this presence, this energy. She actually was interested in us in a way that a lot of adults are not interested in kids.
Mm-hmm.
She got on the floor and played with us. And she was more fun than my parents. So we would sort of want to be close to her.
Mm. Did she have any sort of rituals? When you visited her, did she give you all a snack or a little gift? Were there any sort of patterns that she had with you guys?
I was just talking to my cousin about this. We remembered that every time we talked to her, she always asked, who's your favorite aunt? Like, that was the ritual. We had to say out loud that she was like 100% the favorite. And she loved purple, so her apartment was full of purple things.
Wow.
Every ceramic set of grapes that ever was produced in California was like in her apartment. Her laugh like really stands out.
What was the flavor of her laugh?
It was big
and
deep. She, at least it seemed to us, expressed like a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm. On these visits in California, were your parents there with you or was it just the kids?
Yeah, no, my parents came too. Mm-hmm. But they were really nerdy and she was really cool. So,
but I mean, beyond her being so fun and cool, what connected you to Gail? It feels like you two had such a special bond.
Yeah. So I'm older than a lot of my cousins, so I just had more time with her. Mm-hmm. I look a lot like her, and I don't look like my parents. So I had these giant glasses when I was growing up that like almost magnified your eyes.
I know the ones,
right?
yep.
So embarrassing. She had the same pair. Oh. So like seeing yourself as this like nerdy kid in the eyes of somebody who you admire.
Totally.
Like, we literally
and she was rocking them.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was. Yeah. I think she felt special and close when we were younger, but I also like missed her more than everybody else as we drifted apart.
You drifted apart.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
When I was 8, unfortunately, pretty early on, kind of right after that period of time where we were visiting her a lot, it was really difficult to see her and spend time with her, and it got increasingly difficult over the years.
What was your understanding of why you stopped seeing your aunt at that time, so around age 8?
Yeah, my understanding was that she was like angry at our family for some choices that were made, but that I think I also understood that wasn't fair in a way. Nobody used the words mental illness, but that there was something about the choices she was making to be estranged from us that really couldn't be explained by anything we had done.
Mm-hmm. It must have been incredibly difficult for you as a little kid because you're describing these golden visits to California, these beautiful memories, and then it sounds like contact was cut off pretty abruptly.
There were times where she would come to family events, but she would never come to something that was like specific. So my bat mitzvah, I think that was a time I really missed her. I hoped that she would be there, and she wasn't. Yeah. But 2 years later, it was time for my cousin Michael's bar mitzvah, and she actually did come. But she was so uncomfortable that she stood in the back of the room. And I like went over to her to stand next to her and hold her hand. And I was like really excited to see her. And there's like a service and then there's a party.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had all these things I wanted to tell her at the party and she didn't come.
Oh. How did you try to make sense of that, of her not coming?
I think I understood that, I don't want to use the word sick, but that she was really struggling. That it wasn't really her in a way. That she was somehow a different person than the aunt we had grown up with.
As you got older, high school age, let's say, did you try to reach out to her?
Yeah, so after we saw her in person, I was, I think, 14 or 15. I made like one final phone call. We had some family events coming up that I really wanted her to be there for, my little sister's bat mitzvah in particular. So it felt like if she could show up for that, that would somehow be like a important symbol that there was hope. It wasn't that easy to make that phone call. But when we were finally on the phone together, I was like, you have to. Like, enough is enough. And she just said that it was too hard. And that, maybe one day when I was an adult, we could like reconnect. But, until then, she really could be part of the family. And I sort of said like, this is it. I need you to be there for us now. Like, it's not about the future.
And when she told you it's just too hard, did it feel like that door was really closed?
It did. Yeah. I mean, this is part of what was so hard about it. I felt like that I might have somehow closed the door.
You felt like you might have done something wrong on that phone call.
I didn't until she died. And then in looking back at that phone call, I really thought like, I did that all wrong. And if I had said something different, she might still be with us.
How did you get the news that she'd passed away?
I was living in Israel my senior year of high school, and I, not the best behaved student at times, and I found out the principal was coming to see me in my dorm room, which is, pretty unusual, and I really thought, what did I do today that would be worthy of this visit? And so my whole context for the conversation with him was going to be, I was already ready to defend, being late to class, and he just said that she died. He had a phone, and he was handing me a phone where my dad was there to kind of explain what had happened.
Did you understand what your dad was explaining to you about how your aunt had died?
I didn't know anybody who had ever died by suicide.
This was
that
the first
whole
person.
The conception of that, I think that might have been when I even learned that was a thing that happened.
Putting yourself back in that 16-year-old mindset, what were you grappling with? What didn't make sense to you?
I just had this idea that somehow if I had said the right things on our phone call, if I was better, if she loved me more, she wouldn't have made the same choice. And so I made it in my head. That was the only thing that made sense, that I had done something wrong, or that I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough of a reason for her to want to live. So I made it kind of a very personal, that was the only thing that I could do to make sense of it, because it was too big to understand outside of my own, relationship with her.
Did you articulate that to anyone? That you were scared it was something you'd done wrong?
I don't think so. I think I really held that pretty close. I think I was really ashamed.
What did you do with the sort of weight of that moving forward in the years that followed?
At the time, I was just trying to understand why she died. It didn't feel like it added up. That even if you're having a hard time, or that is such a final, permanent action, I still don't understand.
You wanted to know why she'd made the decision she did. Is that fair?
Yeah.
After the break, Samantha looks for answers. How her search ended in an unforgettable conversation with the actor David Schwimmer. That's next. So, Samantha, after your Aunt Gail's death, you felt compelled to try to figure out why she made the decision to end her life. And in your essay, you have this part where you talk about the things you did to try to find those answers. Can you read that part of your essay for me?
Yeah. I needed to know why my aunt had left me. And I searched for answers everywhere. I was the only college freshman I knew with a private investigator. I got access to the police file from the day she died. And then I spent years trying to forget what I saw in it. I took a trip to California to meet her friends. I looked so much like her that they said it was like seeing a ghost.
Tell me about meeting one of these friends. Do you remember what they told you?
Yeah, I actually met them as a group.
Okay.
They were able to share both facts, but also more about her mindset, her feelings, what those kind of last weeks and months were like for her. So I thought that was also helpful. And also, it still wasn't everything.
They were filling in some of the gaps, but you still felt like you didn't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when we think about our own lives, right? What could happen where, how bad would it have to be where you could say, oh yeah, you should just die. There's never going to be an equation where you're this thing happened and this thing happened and that equals it's okay to leave us. Never.
It still didn't
add
compute.
up. Yeah.
That's really hard. You're learning more, you're gaining facts, you're learning new memories from her friends, but you don't have the answers that you feel like you need.
Yeah, I think what's sad is that it was very clear to her friends that this was the direction her life was going in, and that she was being pretty vocal about, like, feeling suicidal. And I actually was like, that was really hard to hear, because I felt like if maybe I had known, I don't know what I would have done, but, that if we had understood that more deeply, that there might be something our family could have done to save her life, like, where were we in that?
There's that guilt that you've been carrying since the age of 16, where it's like, I could have done more.
Yeah. I think that's partly what I left feeling like.
I mean, because you're trying so many things to get answers. You have that private investigator in college, you flying to California to meet Gail's friends and talk about her. And then you also do this thing just a few years ago that I find really fascinating. It's called past life regression. Can you tell me what that is and what happened to you during that experience?
Yeah. So about 5 years ago, I was still, like, in that questioning, wanting to understand more. And I had a friend who had decided to become a practitioner of hypnosis and past life regression. And she basically explained to me that specifically there's an opportunity in that work to really experience kind of like being in heaven, and being in this world in between lives. So she walked me through this process, and I was in this, like, heaven kind of environment, and there she was. And she's, like, frozen in time, right? And I asked her why she died. And, she said, there is no why.
There is no why.
Yeah. And that's the only thing I remember. I'm fairly certain that we didn't say anything else. And I, like, woke up with these words, like, there is no why. Kind of, like, really feeling like the most profound wisdom, like, I could ever have. Not that, like, you'll never understand. It's that there is no understanding. Like, there is no why, to me, says that it is unknowable. And the journey that you go on to find the unknowable is never going to lead you to any real understanding. And it's okay. And once you internalize the idea that you can never know, you can let go and you can move forward.
Did you feel like you were able to let go of this search for why?
I don't think there's anything else she could have said where I would have been like, okay, I'm done. She said, like, the exact right thing that I needed to hear to be able to move on.
I'm thinking back to 16-year-old you feeling like there was something you did wrong. Do you feel like that weight was released?
Like, the thing that feels most true is that I don't have to, like, bear the weight of that guilt anymore.
So once you were free of that guilt that you'd carried for so long, were you able to move past your aunt's death? Or did you feel like you had other questions you needed answered?
I think once it wasn't about why she died, I just, like, wanted to know if she mattered. Like, I had met this small group of friends, who still thought about her and cared about her. But somehow, like, this idea that these, like, celebrities that I had always, I'd grown up watching and I had admired, that if, like, they remembered her or they cared about her, that would say something about who she was, that I could, like, that would be meaningful.
That you could hold on to.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that David Schwimmer was one of the actors who knew your aunt. And a few years ago, something really incredible happened. You saw that David Schwimmer himself was speaking at a conference you were going to. This was your chance to see if he remembered your Aunt Gail. Let's go to that part of your essay.
Sure. In my head, my conversation with David Schwimmer always went like this. I say, "Hi, David, you worked with my aunt, Gail Joseph, a long time ago." And David says, "I remember Gail. She did such a great job, and we all really loved her. Even though it wasn't real, his words meant so much to me because I needed to believe that she was loved and good at the job that she cared so much about. What if I worked up the nerve to talk to David and he said, I don't remember? Or what if I didn't get to talk to him at all? These fears had left me a sobbing mess in my hotel room. I called my best friend Sarah and told her I could not do it. I could not meet David Schwimmer. I couldn't risk the dream. After a few deep breaths, we agreed that I was going to put on my big girl pants and go downstairs because not trying would be the worst outcome. I stood in the back while he spoke. I hoped I could catch him as he left, but after his speech, he sat down to listen to the next speaker. When that ended, I made a beeline for him, but some man got there first. When they finally stopped talking, David tried to sit back down, and that's when I stepped up and said, "Hi, David, I'm Samantha. You worked with my Aunt Gail Joseph a long time ago." He smiled and said, "Of course. I remember Gail. She was great, and we really loved her." Putting his hand to his heart, he added, "She felt like family. Thank you for giving me the chance to think about her." I did a lot more crying later that evening.
That conversation went kind of better than you could have imagined.
It was everything and more.
What did it mean that he remembered your aunt?
I had no idea. Was she just one of a million people who worked in the background? Mm-hmm. Or was she a person who really, whose presence was known and felt? Mm-hmm. I imagined that it was, and I had heard, stories here and there of the impact that it had, but hearing it directly from him, that she mattered, that almost 20 years after she died, that he remembered her. Mm-hmm. It was everything I could have hoped for.
Gail passed away at age 39 when you were 16. Can I ask how old you are now?
This has been the worst year since she died because I just turned 40. Mm. And in those that week, everybody who's lost somebody to suicide kind of knows exactly what date they're going to outlive them. That's this unique experience because you have a person you love and care about who died. And you have to go through this experience of saying I'm going to make different choices, mm-hmm. and I am going to like it or not. I have to outlive this person, and I also have to relate in a different way. At 39 myself, I can imagine what it would feel like to be disappointed by some of the ways that your life didn't turn out mm-hmm. how you imagined, which I couldn't do at 16 years. I couldn't relate to her life experience at mm-hmm. all at 16 years old. And so in this particular year has been very difficult. I have felt her presence in a new way. Mm-hmm. As I approach this milestone, my family will tell you my 40th birthday mm-hmm. was we're not talking about my birthday. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do any, mm-hmm. I just need this day to come and go. And then I will just be older than her. But I do not want to celebrate being older than her. Mm-hmm. I just wish she was here. If I could change anything, I would want all this to go away, and I just would want her to be here.
Samantha, thank you so much for telling me about your Aunt Gail.
Thank you so much for giving me the chance.
You can find a link to Samantha Joseph's full Modern Love essay in our show notes. This is the last episode of our season. We'll be back in October with all new episodes. Modern Love is produced by Julia Botero, Christina Josa, and Hans Buetow. It's edited by Sarah Saracen. Our executive producer is Jen Poyant. This episode was mixed by Sophia Landman, and our show was recorded by Maddie Masiello. The Modern Love theme music is by Dan Powell. Original music by Dan Powell, Marian Lozano, and Rowan Nemisto. Digital production by Nell Gologli. The Modern Love column is edited by Daniel Jones. Mia Lee is the editor of Modern Love Projects. I'm Anna Martin. Thanks for listening.